Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the justBernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the justBernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I have got a wonderful show for you today. In just a few moments, Miriam Delicado is going to be joining me live here for the hour. Before we bring Miriam on, let me welcome my co-producer, co-host, and all-around helper of everything that I've been doing for the last almost 10 years. Geez, welcome. Treva Nod is joining me live from Winnipeg, Manitoba. Hi, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing good. How about you?
Very, very good. Very good. I'm sitting here looking at the date, and it's June 16th, 2015. Treva, in 2 weeks will be the day, it'll be the 9th anniversary of the birth of my YouTube channel, and we met shortly after that.
That's crazy.
Can you believe that? 9 years. Anyway, so with that being said, I just want to let everybody know, I hope you've been checking out the YouTube channel. We've been updating a lot of stuff. I do have a new series that comes, actually, let me mention that, by the way. Activate is my new consciousness awakening series that I'm doing every week. I've been releasing the videos on Sunday, but I've decided, actually, the people that I work with, Full Screen, has decided Saturdays are better. So if you are keeping an eye on the series and you are subscribing to the Activate series, it'll be out at 2 p.m. on Saturdays from now on. And I think we've had a lot of great conversation. It is basically a discussion on the awakening process. What are we going through? What are you feeling? What kind of shifts are you going through? What awakenings are you having? Are you having political awakenings? Are you having spiritual awakenings? What kind of obstacles are you dealing with? How do you deal with your friends and family when you're going through the awakening? And it's just been a great ongoing discussion. So make sure to check it out. You can find it at bernardalvarez.com/activate, just like the word activate. But anyway, so Treva and I had the joy of watching some of Bonnaroo. I don't know if anybody watches Bonnaroo. I've been watching Bonnaroo for several years now. Gosh, when did we start? I guess when the Avett Brothers played back in 2009. I watch it every summer. And Treva and I got to watch Brandi Carlile, and now Treva's been on a Brandi Carlile kick. Are you having fun with watching Brandi?
Yep.
She's great. She's going to be headlining here at Floyd Fest in Roanoke. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to go see it, but she's such a great performer. And if you guys like real authentic music with real voices and real guitars and whatnot, she's right up there. She's awesome. Anyway, without further ado, let me tell you about my friend Miriam Delicado. Has been on the show before, and we just looked it up. It's been about 1.5 years since she's been on the show. Miriam was a contactee, physical contactee back in the 90s, where she received an abundance of cosmic information for humanity. She's gone on to write a book about it, as well as traveling around the world and meeting with the indigenous and discussing what we're going to be doing for humanity, with humanity at this great time in our lives. So without further ado, welcome back to the show, Miriam Delicado.
Well, thank you, Bernard. It's nice to be here. And as we were discussing just before we started the show, I didn't realize that that time had passed so quickly. You know,
I know.
And I think that that's part of that'll be part of our conversation today.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too. But with that being said, you haven't been on the show in about a year and a half, and I know I've been changing my focus around. I know our audience has been changing and evolving as well. So I wanted to have the opportunity, perhaps, if you could share with us, for maybe some of the listeners that don't know your work yet, to
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about the experience you had in Canada when you met with the Tall Blondes, and what was it that they offered you?
Yeah, thanks, Bernard. I think that the way that you just worded it is what they offered me is a very unique way that I've heard someone word my experience, and I actually really like it. So thank you.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Okay. So for those who haven't had an opportunity to become familiar with my story, I'm a woman from Canada who, at the age of 22 years, in 1988, was driving on a highway in Canada, was followed by a UFO, and there were other adults involved in the car and a child. And eventually, we pulled over onto the side of the road where I was then taken from the car. I don't remember anyone else being taken from the car, but I was taken from the car and actually physically taken on board a UFO. And so they sort of downloaded me with massive, just incredible, massive amounts of information on every subject imaginable and how it related to humanity and the life that we have here, like the actual life that we are intended to have here. And through that experience, everything in my life completely changed, as one could imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gone through, I was thinking, man, it has been 27 years. This is I think this is the 27th year. And it's still a daily processing of this experience. It really is, because it was so intense. And so now I have a website, bluestarprophecy.com, that I hope that people go and check out. And I wrote a book many years ago, released it at the end of 2007. And I do share that book for free now on my website through a PDF. So please go there and download the book. And you can check out my story a little bit more. And hopefully today in the show, Bernard, because we haven't talked for such a long time, we'll be able to squeeze in a little bit about where we are according to these tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed extraterrestrials that I encountered. And just because people always ask, it was not an easy transition of acceptance. It's still not. I don't think it ever will be. But these particular beings, I have found through these 27 years that even in today's environment of this subject matter, that these very specific beings are one of the more rare sightings of these beings, especially in the physical form.
Yes, I was reading. I was actually reading on your website that they get confused. A lot of people confuse them with the Nordics, which is a very popular or a very active group that seems to show up physically quite a bit, but they're not the same.
No, they are not. They are absolutely not. I have to chuckle on that because human beings try to put everything into a category. It's part of the brain's process of being able to understand something. And so many people have talked about the Charles Hall, tall whites, for example, which they are not. They're not those either. They are not the Nordics, which are more of the they are super buff, physically fit looking type blonde-haired, blue-eyed beings. They are not those. These are very specific. They're extremely tall. They have almost cat-like, blue eyes, very strange looking tufts of hair, very strange looking beings. And very scary looking beings, if in fact, because they're just so different.
Right, right.
I just looked at the time and it said 11:11. I don't always look at the time, so I just have
Right on. Right on. Well, with that being said, 11:11, it's 2:11 here. With that being said, do they maintain a psychic and or physical contact with you still?
Yes, they do, and they always have throughout this time for the most part. There was a time period way back when they sort of drifted away, but they were always still present in my life, and they would pop in every now and then. And then once I started to do this work in 2003 and sort of was reawakened by them to start work of just sharing my story with the world, that's when they started to have a lot more telepathic communication with me, and also physical communications. I started having a lot of sightings back from 2003 and for the next few years after that. And I still do have sightings from time to time of orbs. And I'm talking about those physical round balls of light that people see, which are not the same as the things that people pick up on photos. It's completely and utterly different.
Yeah.
That one is physical and one is not. So I've had a fair amount of sightings of those. And interestingly enough, there is a high percentage, I would say, of people who physically meet me and have one-to-one and, sit downs with me. And then directly after that, within the next a very short period of time, they'll have a sighting of their own.
Very interesting.
That happens quite often as well. But these beings do still communicate with me. I find it difficult sometimes because I wish that the communication was more to help guide me. But I also recognize that it's almost as though sometimes if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, they don't communicate with me because it's like, oh, well, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. We don't need to, push you or guide you or, all of that. It's interesting.
Yes, it is actually. And I can't help but notice the parallel between your story and my story in the sense that I had my experience back in the early 90s in 92. And the same thing happened in the sense that they came back into my life probably 2004, 2005, and kind of forced me to, go public and tell my story and start doing this work. And I can't help but wonder, was there something going on in the early 2000s that maybe I didn't pick up on? Because I hear so many similar parallels with other people that are doing the work we're doing as well.
Well, what I found is that, I've never been one to research or read other people's experiences, because especially in the beginning, that's one of the things that helped me to remain sane. Was that I could really get confirmation of something along the way and know that it was purely mine and not have to question, did I read that in a book somewhere and it just came from my subconscious? So I was very blessed to have that kind of an experience, especially in the early days when these kind of experiences were not as mainstream or well known or talked about or in the public. So I think that some of us from the older generation of experiencer have that luxury. We may not have seen it as that in the beginning, that's for sure, but I see it definitely as a gift and a luxury. What's interesting is that I've heard, just through casual conversation with different people who've had these experiences, that we all have similar what we call timelines, and they do coincide. Like this time period in 1988, there was a lot of UFO activity. Just prior to that, it had been very quiet for a number of years, not a lot of sightings or experiencers, and it seems to go in cycles. And so what I know from these beings is that what some of the things that they have shared with me is that we have a literal timeline. And I know people talk about time travel and this and that and the other thing, and let's not get confused with anything other than sitting here right now today, what we're looking at. It's right now in the moment that we have to look at. And what I know is that due to the energies that we are creating ourselves as human beings and helping to release onto the planet, which we have been doing for a very long time, we do know that one type of energy can affect another type of energy. For example, when we create electricity from hydro dams, it's created from water through a process. It then makes a byproduct of electricity, right? It's a great example of what the star beings, these beings, who I call the great ancestors, that's the perfect name for them, for me, the great ancestors, these tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed beings. So the great ancestors have said that many of us in the spiritual community, and not just in the spiritual community, but in the world itself, people who are transforming and awakening to an understanding of any type, whether it's about our responsibility to the earth or our responsibility to the air, to the water, to ourselves, to our spiritual, to our health. All of this becomes a transformed energy that we then are physically releasing into the rest of the world. And then by doing so, it becomes more saturated and dense, and then it has a further effect on what's around it. And so this is part of this massive information that these beings so clearly discussed with me back in 1988. And this has really been the ongoing conversation with them throughout these 27 years, is about the transformation of humanity in an awakening of understanding the technology and the understanding of who we really are as people. And we have a tendency as human beings to become very confused by what this means to be human and what this means in our responsibility as a human. And the responsibility is just to accept where we are, to enjoy where we are. It's not about fighting. It's not about being a warrior and fighting for our rights. It's really about understanding who we are and then taking a process within ourselves first, and then our immediate surroundings, and then our community, and then the world, and taking that on as in a responsible manner and doing what we can to support that. That was it.
I can't agree with you more. I would just want to point out a parallel, if only for the reason being that this person is coming back on my show. Gordon Asher Davidson speaks of it as of the transfiguration of humanity, and the way that I'm hearing it from you is kind of the way that I feel is the way. It isn't about forcing change on the outside. It's kind of, well, the transfiguration of ourselves, changing who we are in order to change the world around us. We can all, be aggravated with, human rights violations. We can all get outraged by, police brutality. But at the end of the day, it's how are we going to change ourselves so we create a better tomorrow? Is that kind of what you're saying?
That is what I'm saying. But I don't want it to be confused with lack of action. Because, for example, there are, it is necessary that we have our eyes wide open to, for example, police brutality that is taking place, but not to have blinders on, to not see that the police are a beautiful, essential service for us as well. And that it is still necessary in our world. And we have to have gratitude for the police in what it is that they're doing. And not all police are bad.
No.
And what upsets me about our, world today is that so often people are putting the blinders on, and they're not looking at things in a balanced way. And it's one of the things that frustrates me in any kind of a movement that I've seen, is that there is this push of wanting to create change and do the right thing, but there not always, but sometimes needs to be a bit of a balance. And what happens is the passions of those involved become so fixated on what it is that they're going after that they're not able to look around to see what other aspects can support change, for example. What is it that can support change? And also, we do need to know and understand what's happening in our world. And this is not about being passive. But it's not about being aggressive either.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of, quote, movements on the planet right now that I am in complete disagreement over. And I'm not going to say who those are and what those are, but I will say that there are a lot of people out there who are part of different kinds of, quote, movements that really I don't agree with. Because one of the things that these tall beings made expressly clear to me back in 1988 was that, and I know it's hard for people to understand, but whatever it was that I did in this life, in this world, I was never allowed to go against the laws that were laid out. I wasn't allowed to break the law in order to accomplish the goal. But does that mean that if a law is wrong and it harms the people that I sit back and I have to be passive about it and just say, yeah, that's okay? No, we can go about rallying and supporting and petitioning and making aware and talking about it, discussing, bringing about education, and voting as well. I mean, not voting at all, I think is inappropriate. I think that we do have a system in place, whatever that system is, broken or not. We have the potential to be able to vote for the right people. There isn't just two options. And, especially with the U.S. going into another presidential election. And again, it's that blinder. Don't vote because they're all bad. Well, let's take a realistic look at this and say, who is it that we want? Marianne Williamson, for example, who has been one of the icons in a movement of spirituality, whether people agree with her style of delivery or not is in my view irrelevant. She's done great work.
Yeah.
Now she's running for running in politics, I believe, in California. And I think that there's an option there. So again, these beings talked about this kind of a process. And I know that this isn't what people want to hear. They want to hear about the wisdom of the universe. What is it? How do we figure things out? Well, it's very simple. It's about self-responsibility in all areas. And that includes the spiritual. And maybe we can talk about that for a minute.
Yes, absolutely. And I have to just chime in here because it's so funny what you're saying. I'm relating to my own evolution with what you're saying. I remember, God, maybe 7 years ago, probably when I first met you, I was very against politics. And I recently was invited to the governor of Virginia's home, the mansion, the executive mansion. They were doing a proclamation for Gay Pride Month in Virginia, and he invited like all the leaders around the state. Now, mind you, I don't like him. I did not vote for him. I would not vote for him. I consider him a corporate-owned politician. He's not very progressive, but he acknowledged the work that we're doing in Virginia, and he's acknowledging the gay civil rights movement that's happening. So I have to applaud him for that. And it's funny because, and I'm sure you can relate to this, how as we evolve, our audience evolves, I should say. If I would have done this 5 years ago, I probably would have had like all these people sending me hate mail, you sell out, this and that.
Right. Exactly. And see, this is what where we are. Just before we came on the show, Bernard, we had a brief conversation, and it was very interesting, and I just want to share it.
Yes.
Last night, before I was, as I was trying to go to sleep, I was just focused on what my age is. I'm 49 years old, which I totally can't believe. And I was thinking to myself, I have at least 20 years left of full, being able to work all of these hours nonstop, being able to travel the world, go into the jungles, be able to trek the mountains, be able to do all of these things. I have 20 years left to do this work. And then it just kept progressing from there. Then I have another X number of years that I can see myself doing public speaking, and I can, taking the next steps and so forth. And, you expressed that you were in that same mode last night.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so here's the interesting thing. I think that through our conversation in this program so far, we can really see that there are parallels for what's happening in the world. And I've expressed this a number of times on other programs, that if we can look at ourselves with clarity and really look at what is happening in our microcosm of our own lives, then we can understand what's happening in the rest of the world, in the macro.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can also be able to see what's coming for us.
Yeah.
You see, as a human family. And we can see what our challenges will be and so forth. And it's something that it takes time to learn to understand what that is for ourselves, And again, that was part of the information that these beings have talked about, is how to be able to understand what's happening in the world and be able to flow with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's really
hold that thought, Miriam. We've got a commercial break, and when we return, we're going to continue our conversation with Miriam Delicado. Be right back.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
And welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are having a fantastic discussion today with Miriam Delicado. And Miriam, we had touched a little bit on earlier in our conversation last week, I should say, about the idea of this. I don't know how we phrase it, but let's say the conscious shift that's happening in humanity, the idea of compassion, the idea of spirituality, being akin to this progress that we're seeing on a scientific level. And I think you mentioned a bit about how a lot within the ufology, for lack of a better term, exopolitics perhaps, some of the people there are talking about it as well, how it goes hand in hand.
Yes, it's the same. There has been so much change in our world. If looking at it from a personal viewpoint, in the last 27 years since these beings talked to me, and one of the things that they focused on during our time together was technology. And we talked about an earlier technology that lies within us. For example, about how we create change is to first change ourselves and then let that energy release and then affect what it is that it is around us. And so that is one form of technology. The other is more physical. And they did come to me a couple of years ago, and they said, okay, it's time for the technologies to rise. It's time for the technologies to come forward. And it really did. And that's one of the things that I've noticed, is that they will sort of come to me and tell me a heads up of things that will be coming in a very not in a specific, yes, this is going to happen and this, and not like a prediction, but more as a whole, things that come forward. And one of that is the science and spirituality. Well, we all know that in order for science to further itself, they have to have an understanding of the spiritual aspect. They have to be able to understand a concept first, because that is how science builds. It comes from the imagination of understanding what science is through math, primarily math, through math, through physics, through astrophysics. And then the imagination has to be able to be freed in order for those mathematics and mathematicians to even be able to take it to another level. Mm-hmm. And so there is this blending of the spiritual and the science that has been building over the last many, many years now. And, you know, this is proven. It's becoming a proven fact that, for example, indigenous cultures have had many of these secrets to the universe. They've just expressed them in a different way. They express them in the form of a ceremony, or they express them in the form of an ancient story. And now science is being able to step in and say, my God, what they're really describing is this aspect of science. So there's been a lot more attention on indigenous cultures, traditional wisdom, for example, traditional knowledge, ancient technologies that people have been tapping into, and looking at it and saying, wow, they really do have some of these base understandings, scientific understandings of what the world is and how it functions. But again, Bernard, the question that I have is, what does that do for us? We have to ask ourselves that. What does it do? Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really do anything if we don't have a spiritual or a base understanding that we are divine beings, that we are in a state of constant growth and of constant change, and yet we are also in the present moment, in the now, in who and what we are. So there has been this incredible blending of this. And what happened in the last couple of years with these beings, these tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed beings that I've had contact with, they have talked about this shift that's coming in technology. And it is becoming not just an awareness around the world, but it is becoming a fact around the world, which are two entirely different things that we absolutely must change. And in saying that, I want to share something that's really important. There's all this talk. Okay, so first of all, years ago, people talked about how, I started to talk about how solar flares were affecting the Earth itself. Mm-hmm. And how they were helping to, they were really big solar flares were affecting physical beings, people, everything, every bit of life on the planet. I went into that really deeply in some of my prior shows that I've done, and how solar flares were affecting the Earth and were causing earthquakes. It took another 2 or 3 years before a number of people within the community started to really tap into that and started talking about it. And now it's a very well-known fact, okay? So here's another one of those revelations, let's call them, about the information that the star beings have talked to me about, which people will get to very soon in a more broad manner. Not that I'm the only one saying this, but there has been a problem on the planet with sinkholes. There's been a problem with sinkholes and with for example, even in Japan, where the earth underneath the oceans have been rising, that's been happening in Hawaii. Other areas of the earth are sinking and so forth. There's been a huge shift in this. And what's happening is the following. If we think of some kind of an orange or some kind of a fruit that has a peel on it, okay, and that has the main piece of fruit on the center. If we take holes and we drill them down all over the place and we punch holes all over this peel, this orange peel, what ends up happening is that whole peel becomes loose. Mm-hmm. It's not affixed to that fruit in the center anymore. And that's what's happening to the planet. And as a result of that, that's what's causing the actual Earth's crust is moving right now. And it has been for the last few years, probably about 3 years now. Mm-hmm. It's become increasingly more loose. And that's partly because of drilling, oil drilling, mining, as well
fracking.
As fracking, absolutely. And fracking has done a really big disservice to the Earth's crust.
Very much, yeah.
So this is really something that we need to focus on in a scientific community. We need to get this resolved quickly. So there is a shift that needs to take place between the scientific community and the spiritual community in understanding this. And I think that is what happens, is that even if people are not recognizing it as a spiritual understanding, yes, we know that's wrong and it's affecting our earth, but it really does come back to a spiritual understanding of it, doesn't it? That we recognize that this is how it is. We don't need science to tell us this. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We can tap in and know that this is what's happening. So the scientific community, the high-level echelon of science, of course, there have been a lot of, conspiracy theories about what's happening in the science community, which I don't want to get into. If you want to research it, it would be a good idea to do so. And I believe that it is about very real issues that we are facing today, that if we do not come into an alignment with the spiritual essence of science, let's say, spiritual science and actual science, and then actual movement of what we're doing, physical work, physical harm, physical positive, everything here that's physically that we're doing, if we don't find the balance in that, that's where the future is destroyed. This is the message of these beings that I have always had since the beginning, which is there has been a process of spiritual awakening. And spiritual meaning what? What does that mean? Spiritual meaning the essence of what we as individuals awaken to. Oh my God, I'm responsible. Okay, great. How am I responsible? For my family, for myself, for my community, for my country, for my world, for my universe. That's, how we can see that. Spiritual means, to me, it means anything that is an awakening or an understanding within ourselves that we believe. Spiritual doesn't mean spiritual as in non-religious. And I know so many people are against religion, but religion does not always have to be dark. It can still have an aspect of an awakening. I've met so many people who are Catholics, for example. I think the Catholic religion has really shifted and changed with its understanding of what a spiritual understanding and a religious understanding, and that they can somehow coexist, mm-hmm. which is great. Because as religious people awaken to a deeper understanding that is simply theirs within themselves, they are then open to more understanding of different aspects of the universe itself. So mm-hmm. we are in a state right now where there is a huge responsible shift responsibility and a shift that's going to be taking place over the next 3 years. Massive change is going to take place, politically, physically, spiritually, everything. Massive shifting is going to take place in the next few years. And we're seeing that. We have seen that. We're seeing the building of that. Again, one of the things that I made a comment about was, prior to it happening, was about a year before. I said that in the coming year that there was going to be an announcement by a major spiritual or religious figure in the world that was going to shock the world. And of course, the new Pope came forward, and he's been continually shocking the world with his statements. And I made that statement prior. I don't often make very specific statements or predictions, let's say, because I find that they can be harmful to our entire community of bringing forward real information that then can get, tossed aside if we become wrong, But it is very clear to me that the information from the tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed beings that I have contact with has been very accurate. So moving forward in what, cosmic consciousness is and where we're going, we have been in a state of coming together in unity. We have been moving through life in a more cosmic, conscious way as a planet. We have been doing this even if we are not aware of it. Even if we are not aware of it. My friends who have not been focused on, quote, spirituality, but have still been my friends, have had major changes in awareness over the last, 10 years. My family, who has not been focused on certain subject matters, have had major shifts within the last 5 years. The planet has, we talk about, this needs to be on mainstream media. We need to talk about this. Stop and look for a moment and truly, without those blinders on, and take a look at the mainstream media, the mainstream, everything that's happening and coming out. There is a shift. But even within that community, they're still having the blinders on. But there has been a shift. And one of the things that I noticed that I wanted to, and I'm sorry, is it okay that I'm just running on here?
Keep going, by all means.
Okay. Thank you. One of the things that happened recently is that I had some health issues that have been very challenging for me. I had to have surgery on May 26th to resolve a long-standing issue that I've had, which I can, I'm happy to say that the surgery went well. I'm still I'm still recovering from it. I don't want to get into the details of it because it's private, surgery, parts of your body are, that's private, but I can say that it went well. I'm doing very, the healing is still in process, and I'm grateful for having the ability to have that support through, the mainstream medical system to be able to heal myself. But I also recognize that it's partly spiritual, and bringing that back, bringing my body back, and bringing myself back into alignment. In saying that, I have had to do nothing for a couple of weeks. Very limited movement, not able to sit for very long and so forth. So what does a girl do? She goes to her Netflix. And that's what I do. And I prefer to watch things on my Netflix and rather than television, because then I'm not bombarded by the commercials. So in doing so, I watched a lot of shows. Something happened. Again, be aware of our surroundings. Be aware of what's really happening. And I have watched so many different genres of television program, and what I see is this. I would like to personally make a statement to all of those Hollywood directors and writers out there. I would like to make a personal thank you to the mainstream television industry, because there are people in those programs all over, peppered, salt and peppered throughout all of that, who are making the one-liners. They are inserting one line into the program, and that one line is focused on Monsanto without saying Monsanto. They are focused on fracking without talking about the oil industry. They are talking about new technologies that are available to us. They are talking about Tesla. They are making the comments. Pay attention. They are trying to make that come out, and they're doing a good job of it, because it becomes first. It comes out in the subconscious. And that's what they're doing. They're bringing it out into the subconscious through those one-liners in the show. And then you will watch that in the next few years, it will become more and more a part of the dialogue in mainstream television. So it's not that we're being fully suppressed. We're being awakened very slowly. And I know that for us who are awake and aware, we want it to come out right now, everything. But there are people within those systems that are bringing it out. And I think that it's fantastic what I've seen. Because in some of the shows I've been like, are you kidding? How did that line get put in there? That is brilliant. And I just smile in the middle of it and send the gratitude of energy out when I see those things. And this is the key. This is a key. I breathe it in and just think, thank you. And I send it back out to whoever it is that's been a part of that. Because the actors, the writers, the producers, the gaffers, the people that are working on the lighting, the production companies, even the studios. If the studios are not looking or paying attention to that closely, well, hey, that's fine, because I know that the production, big television conglomerates don't want a lot of these things to come out. So the way that they're doing it is brilliant. And I wanted to make that clear, that that is unity. That is unity. That is cosmic consciousness filtering through and filtering through and filtering through. And this cosmic consciousness I have seen for 27 years pop up from time to time in different situations and things that have come out. And we really do have this cosmic, true, unified movement that's taking place in every single aspect and in every single area of life. And I always want people to have gratitude for that, rather than coming forward and saying, no, being a warrior and wanting to fight. That is not the way. That we still have to thank every single individual who has been quietly working towards bringing this forward. And Bernard, I know that in our community of spirituality, the alternative community, in any form of alternative that is not, quote, mainstream, we are the ones that have shifted the planet. We, as unified voice, have completely transformed this planet. And we are only a few thousand people. And we have managed to re-educate and push that out. Project Camelot, yourself, myself, people who are, Collective Evolution.
Revolution Radio.
Revolution Radio,
Absolutely.
all the people involved. The UFO community, the spiritual community, the mid-level spiritual community. We have all played a part in shifting the entire planet. So let's just keep going. But try to now shift into a more heart center, because that's what we need now. Now we need the heart. And I found that in our communities of the spiritual and the alternative, there's been a lot of, quote, distraction with competition and ego. And it really harms us.
Yeah, it's not necessary.
and we have to move into the heart. And so thank you for letting me bring all of that into
yes.
Into the conversation.
Well, Miriam, I hate to say we're out of time. This was beautiful, perfect timing. Thank you very, very much for this. Everybody, we love you very, very much, and we will see you next Tuesday for actually my consciousness talk. It will be next Tuesday. I love you, everybody. Bye-bye.